Okay. Okay, so thank you very much for this session. And my name is Xiaochen Zhang, and I'm the president of FinTech for Good. And this is a session about the global innovation around the world. And we have an amazing panel. And the other day that I had an interview with Bloomberg Finance, they asked me that since there are a lot of new regulation in China, and do you think that the flow of capital from China will slow down? And that's a big question. And my answer to them actually is not from the investor side. It's really from the innovation side. If the market can innovate fast enough, the flow will continue. But the market cannot react that way, then of course it will slow down. And earlier Donna just mentioned this is one of the examples that using blockchain-based transaction then just facilitate the cross-border flow. And then here in this panel that we have very diverse background. And I will first invite you to introduce yourself. And then we can just share with us later that what are the amazing things that you're doing. Yeah, from Dan.
My name is Dan Spuller. I'm the Director of Member Services for the Chamber of Digital Commerce, Washington, D.C.'s largest trade association dedicated specifically to blockchain technology and its advocacy. I have a background in mainly public administration, formerly worked with the North Carolina Department of Commerce and Department of Transportation. An enthusiast of public key cryptography and Bitcoin for several years, and I also am an enthusiast of technology and transportation. I served on North Carolina's Autonomous Vehicle Roadmap project, so I have a keen interest in all things technical.
I'm Margaret Miller. I'm a lead financial economist at the World Bank Group and the Finance and Markets team, and the global lead for responsible financial access. And we're looking at marketplace finance in particular as a source of innovation and especially in relation to improving financial inclusion for both individuals and small businesses.
I'm Anca Rusu. I work on financial inclusion with the IFC, which is part of the World Bank Group. I myself am part of the IFC MasterCard Foundation Partnership for Financial Inclusion, working. Am I interfering with something?
Yeah.
Okay. In sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of our work is building a knowledge base on what works and what doesn't in terms of fintech and digital financial services for development.
Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Samson Williams. I'm Chief Dreamer for Sead. We're an Ireland-based fintech company. As you can see, I'm very Irish. I dream, imagine, plan, and implement these far-off notions of awesomeness that can be done. That's why I like blockchain. I love what the World Bank is going. I've already got an answer for your question about social impact. And so I'm here to learn from these other rock stars what's next over the horizon.
My name is Sead Muftic. Thank you for inviting me. Nice to be here. I'm working for 40 years in only one area, IT security. I have received PhD from The Ohio State University, so Buckeye. And I'm working in IT security for 40 years. I've been working always 3 full-time jobs continuously and parallel. The first full-time job, I was for 25 years, tenured and full professor of IT security at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. Parallel to that, I was 6 years professor at GW. I was professor in Sri Lanka. I was professor everywhere through the world. So that's my first hat and full-time job. My second full-time job, I can call myself an international expert. So I'm running different projects on behalf of European Commission for 25 years. I'm currently their strategic expert for blockchain virtual currencies. I'm registered as an expert by CSIR in South Africa, Center for Innovation and Industrial Research. I was running projects with World Bank. I was running projects with Inter-American Development Bank in Peru, with Swedish International Development Agency. So I'm floating around the world as kind of expert for security. My third job, I'm continuous innovator. Some would call that entrepreneur. So with my team from my first job, that is my former PhDs, We are continuously designing, innovating, developing, deploying, starting companies, merging, running companies. So I'm also listed as a CEO of the Blockchain Information Exchange Bank, which is not the bank, it's IT company that has some products in the area of secure financial transactions based on virtual currency and blockchain.
So thank you very much. And one reminder that because we have time limitations, so each question that please be short. And my first question is regarding, what as we just look at the panel, that is really my old friends and the new friends, because I used to work for the World Bank, and so my old colleagues. And then from the crowdfunding side, and now I'm also in the blockchain side. So it's really like, I want to really see that from my old friends, new friends, from crowdfunding and blockchain, that how can everything just be together and one help the other, then to advance some of the work that you are doing, like maybe starting from you again?
Yeah, sure. So I think collaboration is going to be absolutely key for this industry. Crowdfunding has come a very, very long way, and I see the blockchain industry kind of at the early stages as well for where crowdfunding was several years ago. I think collaboration, like I said earlier, is going to be key, and we have a lot of working groups at our organization. So our main focus is to advocate on the policy level, both at the federal government and at the state level. And we've had a lot of success pushing forward with positive legislation for money transmission licensures at the state level. And we're working hard on cultivating these relationships at the national level here in the United States and also abroad. So a few of our working groups, of many, specifically we have one focused on IP, the Blockchain IP Intellectual Property Council. We have the state working group, we have the Digital Assets Accounting Consortium, and we have the Blockchain Alliance, which is focused mainly on law enforcement. But crowdfunding is one of those industries that I think the blockchain sector can learn a lot from. And we're seeing a new industry emerge within blockchain called ICOs. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that, initial coin offerings, which is a whole new world of funding for a lot of these startup companies. And I'll get into that a little bit later. I don't want to talk too much.
Yeah, so there are a number of ways that we engage on this topic with and bring together, to be honest, the private and public sector sides at the World Bank. One is convening this kind of activity, today, where we would host meetings, workshops, webinars to facilitate interactions between industry players, experts, researchers, and regulatory communities. We are a source of data in many instances and are looking at how to scale up our access to relevant data in this topic in terms of marketplace finance. Also advisory, we have a lot of advisory projects as well as operations that we do with financial sector regulators, and we see a lot of interest and hunger around the topics of marketplace finance. And a couple of the areas I work on specifically and that are part of what we call responsible finance are consumer protection and financial education. And given the discussion today, I think both of those are certainly critical aspects of making marketplace finance kind of broadly something that can be really relevant in developing countries, especially where the level of knowledge is of course going to be very different than in a more developed market setting.
I feel that's very hard to follow up, especially since we work for the same group. But look, I think blockchain is a great tool. I think especially right now, it tends to be very hip. Everybody wants to talk about it. And so when deploying projects, I think it's important to realize the difference between an application that actually needs blockchain and one that could be running with a centralized database instead. And not just using IT for the sake of IT or because venture capital seems very enthusiastic about blockchain. But fintech and blockchain have a huge role to play in the Universal Financial Access by 2020 pledge that the World Bank and 32 other partners have agreed to. The penetration of mobile services and digital financial services in the developing world is going to play a huge role in this. It's still playing. I think GSMA, so the Industry Association of Mobile Providers, just signed on to the UFA 2020 goals. And I think that is, fintech is the only way we are going to be able to actually achieve that.
Cool. I like to take a step back and just think of it in terms of education, because we're selling ice cream to people who live in the desert when we talk about blockchain and crowdfunding. And so myself in particular, yo soy tejano, yo nací en Texas, mi madre es un chicano de Los Angeles. So my mom's Mexican, I was born in Texas, and there's not a crowdfunding site that talks to Latinos. And so you're missing out. We talk about diversity and inclusion, but we should really be talking about how are you going to acquire these customers. I was talking to my friend Faye Shapiro from eProcom about how do you talk to the millennials, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So when we're talking about these concepts, what is blockchain? How do you build it? How do you maintain it? How do you integrate it? And so for crowdfunding and blockchain, they're very similar, on par in that sense, because as the only black person in the room at the moment, laughing, true, it's how do you come into our community to explain what is it? Oh, I'm sorry, there's one other person. There's one other black guy here. How do you come into our community and talk about this so that people get it? Because otherwise they're gonna be left out of this whole movement. And so when we talk about on the global scale, it's, at least for me, we're starting locally with the education and the awareness, so that when we do scale internationally, this is ice cream, it's amazing.
So this panel is about crowdfunding and how to use blockchain, but I would like to start a little bit broader. I would like to inform you on some initiatives about crowd and the blockchain, not crowdfunding, but crowd. So let me specify first for you what I mean by crowd and what is exactly the crowd. The crowd can be distinguished in this sense, what I'm talking about, by the answer to the following question. Do you know how many people in the world have bank account and bank card? The answer is 20%, 1 billion. And 5 billion people are sometimes called bottom of the pyramid. They live on cash. So there are kind of two crowds when it comes to blockchain. There is top of the pyramid, 1 billion, and there are 5 billion in the crowd. And problems and blockchain benefits could be different for the two crowds. So one initiative that I'm involved in is called digital inclusion. This digital inclusion has two lines of action, two projects. One is digital identities. You wouldn't believe how many people in the world don't have email and don't have identity, which is very important. We are in contact or starting to collaborate with Grameen Foundation. They have a digital identities program in Indonesia, so we are working with them on that. World Bank has ID4D program, Identity for Development, so that's another item. The third item is actually land registry and location for us individually. Where are you located in terms of floods, disasters, shipment, etc. Swedish International Development Agency, SIDA, is funding the project to create land registry, and FIG, Federation of International Geodesy, headquartered in Denmark, they are involved in several countries, India, Africa, to create land registry and run over the blockchain. That is digital inclusion. Second initiative or group of projects is financial inclusion. Financial inclusion, when it comes to the 5 billion, is all 1 billion to 5 billion or north to south. And there are kind of globally three kind of systems. One is called remittance, you know what that means. Another one is called charity. And the third one is called like NGO or World Bank or whatever, programs. All these programs are one way, and lots of problems only because of lots of intermediaries. So if you take charity and you put $100 until the person in Haiti receives the money, takes 3 months, and at the end of the pipe is $20. And 80 is eaten in administrative costs. So is remittance, so our other NGO and other programs. So we are promoting blockchain for peer-to-peer that the donor gives to beneficiary directly, bypass all intermediaries. The third is some kind of economic inclusion. Very briefly, there are ideas of having solar energy over the blockchain and trading energy. In Morocco, they have solar farms. In some other countries, China, it's strategic. So we are working with a couple of companies who are actually doing energy, and we are enabling them to trade energy over the open market. And the fourth is community inclusion, and that is education. So I'm delivering workshops, lectures, white papers, courses, and so on, so to lift up this community so that they can produce and not only receive, and basically run all what they produce through the digital economy over blockchain. So these are the initiatives that...
Yeah.
If I could just, you know, our data at the bank, we have something called Global Findex you may be familiar with, which is a demand-side survey. And we're actually in the third wave right now. And our best estimates are that we have about 2 billion adults that are unbanked. But as of, you know, we're in the field right now collecting data. So next spring we'll have new data, and we hope that that will have fallen again. So it's a little bit better picture, but we still have a huge amount of work to do.
I'm doing a little bit to the extreme to make my point.
And my next question is, yeah, because for FinTech for Good, we basically do, you know, we identifying global new technologies, then we bring them to emerging market or developing countries to address some of the challenges that like, you know, very daunting challenge. So here that's, you know, I actually just want to ask you, and for you that's working in different countries, what are some of the most innovative technologies or solutions that you have seen at the use case level? And you know, if you don't have are aware any, then we can just skip the question. Yeah.
I think one of the things I want to mention is it's beyond just financial services, the blockchain technology. I think that's by far what it all began with Bitcoin specifically. But one of the things we're doing at the Chamber is we're focusing on all the different use cases that are coming in. And it seems like every other day there's a new one that pops up. One of the ones that we see that's really, really fast growing, there's several. There's healthcare, there's insurance, and there's supply chain. And those are some of the 3 fastest ones growing. And from a supply chain standpoint, and this could be related to a global market, Walmart is testing with IBM support a program where they're able to test produce in the United States and pork in China. And they're testing this right now. In an attempt to track, and which will save money on the supply chain. So if there's a food recall, for example, if there's a bag of lettuce that has E. coli in it, Walmart has 260 million customers a week. That's a lot of money when you have to recall and throw away all those bags of lettuce. So what the blockchain technology will do with this POC is it will track where it began. So they'll be able to identify, pinpoint where the origination was, and then track it on a blockchain ledger. So I think that's just one use case. I mean, we see trade finance, we see other groups that are coming forward, but that's from a global standpoint, I think that could be a positive case.
Right, and for that, actually not only for the bigger volume of trade and to just using blockchain to identify the source, original region can be also very powerful for crowdfunding campaigns as well. Yeah,
absolutely.
So just something to mention, one of the areas that we think is really important is, and that is going to be a focus of both private sector development and policy, is the access to data. And you know, mentioning, kind of building a bit on your comments about the ubiquitous cell phone. I mean, really what has changed and what would enable marketplace finance as well in especially emerging economies is that so many people have cell phones and increasingly they have smartphones. And those smartphones are creating an opportunity to collect very rich data on individuals that wouldn't have been possible previously, that can be used for all kinds of you know, beneficial issues, but it also raises, of course, consumer protection concerns. But we think that this, the issue of data, how to deal with them, how to develop them, how to provide appropriate access and consumer protection is something where there needs to be increased focus and where we see a lot of opportunity.
Feels almost choreographed. So just because the example that I do want to share, it's a company that I'm really fond of and that both IFC and the MasterCard Foundation have invested in and has recently, actually this week, been featured in The Economist. It's called Zuna. And it is a alternative credit scoring and lending company using cell phone data and social network analysis to identify people to authenticate identities. It's now, I think, in its 2nd or 3rd round of venture funding. It's present in 5 countries, and it's looking at a 6th, which is the DRC, a notoriously difficult market. And just simply the ability to demonstrate who you are in a developing country, which you're not guaranteed an ID the way Western Europe and the US has, is one of the biggest challenges to accessing finance. And then the ability to get credit in an environment where perhaps collateral or proving that you actually own collateral is a huge deal. It's a great breakthrough. They're not the only ones who are doing it, but I'm fond of them and they're a really cool team, so that's my choice of example.
We're working on an innovative product for ourselves in Ghana. We have some family offices. They do something called ESO and SUSU, so informal trading of money. So as we're able to identify this is a real person, we can actually take that from the informal system onto our platform, which we're super excited about. Some of the things that we're also looking at is exotic things like Snapchat, because you can send cash that way. WhatsApp, 600 daily active users. WeChat, 800 million daily active users. But in America, no one is on WeChat unless you know Xiaochen and his crew. And so we're looking at some things that they're pretty standard in the rest of the world, but in America, the Irish are always laughing at us because we just got the chip that you put it in, you go have a coffee, you come back and it's eventually processed. And in Ireland, it's touch pay. And you're done and you're gone. So there's lots of things that we're looking at, and I'm interested to hearing the rest.
I'm involved in many interesting projects, so I will give you one which is very kind of interesting, and that is actually a project by European Commission. So I'm talking to one of the vice presidents, and I'm actually there as an expert for virtual currency blockchain. So he says, do you know that 30% of electrical energy in Europe in the grid is produced by individual households and solar panels? I say, okay, I don't know, so what should I do about it? He said, we have some problems with this system. We don't like it. We would like you to help us. So I said, what should I do about that? He said, we don't like first because your battery is connected to the big brother. In this area here is Pepco. So it's a closed market. So they take energy when they want. They sometimes don't take energy, so it's wasted. If they take it, they determine the price. So all this together. So I said, okay, so what should I do? Here is what we would like to do. Number one, if you have extra energy, we would like that you post it on a blockchain as an auction. Number two, every individual household can then buy and you can get the best price. So Pepco and others should be only transmitters. Number two, we would like that these people buy and sell energy, that they are paid with so-called Eurocoin. We don't like Bitcoin and all this cryptocurrency. We would like to establish stable commercial system of virtual currency so that energy is paid with virtual currency. Oh, it's a very good idea. And finally, they say, we would like you that you don't sell energy at all, but that kilowatts are used as virtual currency. So you give a lecture to my kid, and I give you 3 kilowatts. So we have now finished the design of this system that will do open trading for energy, will do payment with virtual currency, and will also do phase 3, that do you want to take kilowatts as virtual currency? And now the project is in the lab test phase.
Thank you. Yeah, and because we are about to launch a new initiative called Financial Inclusion Blockchain Lab. And again, this is a question to you that, so what should the lab focus and how such a lab can just help to support what you are doing, or how you can support the lab to just bring more innovative solutions to different parts of the world. Yeah.
Any chance, any opportunity that young people have, college students all the way up to anybody in their career, anything they can do to kind of work together to innovate using these incubators, the one you're preparing to launch, the labs. We just launched the DC Blockchain Center last fall in Washington at the other 1776 location. And we've had a lot of success. We've had a lot of interest. The challenge, though, here still in the United States is the regulatory side, and there's a big education gap, too, with some of our regulators. But if we could get some sandboxes like other nations have, and if we can get some more positive regulation at the national level, I think we'll have more opportunities to grow, so we don't have to have the talent to go all over. But from an international standpoint, I think the labs is a great concept, and I think I think every university should have one. I think it's great to have them start at that level.
Yeah, I mean, we are very interested in seeing how we can take advantage of all the knowledge that's out there in the U.S. and in the developing countries, because sometimes we even see opportunities for leapfrogging with these kinds of technologies. So I think, finding ways that we can identify problems. Something that's been mentioned this week has been collateral registries, for example, where these mechanisms may not exist or may not be fully formed in some emerging markets. Is there an opportunity to use new technologies such as blockchain to make more secure, transparent access to that kind of information? So I think there's a lot of opportunity to share information, to see how we can collaborate.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Also working on financial inclusion. So in between digital identities and collateral registries, I think are the two main things that I would think blockchain financial inclusion lab could contribute.
Doing a shameless plug for the Inclusive Innovation Incubator. It's in3dc.com. Xiaochen is having a blockchain meeting there tomorrow from 9 to 12 p.m. because part of it is, what is blockchain? How do you build it? How do you maintain it? How do you integrate it? And particularly when we talk about HBCUs, it's on Howard University campus. HBCUs are historically black colleges, universities. There's 97 of them in the US. We want to take this concept from Howard to the other 97 so that as we talk about HBCUs, we're actually not talking about black people, we're talking about Latinos, and we're talking about women. Because women graduate, more women graduate than anyone else, and Latinos, the population is growing and sustaining the enrollment at HBCUs. So we're thinking about how do we not only meet the needs of today to make America great again, but we want to meet the needs of tomorrow. Smile at me, Faye. We want to meet the needs of tomorrow because blockchain and coding and programming, those are blue collar jobs of the future. And if we don't start that pipeline today, the jobs are just going to go elsewhere and the people won't have the skill sets. So what I would love to see from the World Bank and other people is support for education.
I have many contacts with many labs, so I will first say what they should not do and what they all do today. And that is today they all develop yet another small application on the top of Bitcoin. They should not do that because this Bitcoin, I would say, is shaky and has no future. So therefore, these labs should do innovation, should solve innovative problems of real serious users for real serious applications. I will put up a couple of very challenging problems. One challenging problem is so-called permission blockchains. Everybody knows what's a permission blockchain at the level of definition. Basically, it's not unpermissioned. But what kind of regulations and rules and protocols and how is it different from whatever exists? That's one very big and challenging problem. The second, for any serious application over blockchain, you definitely need security. But we know that current blockchains, they provide privacy and anonymity. And security against privacy and anonymity are completely controversial because if you need security, you must know exactly who is the person. And if you want to have anonymity, you don't want to know who is the person. So how to combine anonymity with security? That's problem number 2. Problem number 3 are the regulatory frameworks. You call in this town here all these regulatory from FINRA, SEC, OCC, and you say, what are the regulations in this area? They say, are you working blockchain? Yeah, come over, give us a workshop. So basically what is needed is some progress on this regulatory frameworks. That's the third aspect.
So thank you, and I think now we are very clear that using the lab to identify problems and then also to just help the knowledge and also then later to bring all the ecosystem players, then we can just solve it together. And the last takeaway message from for the audience that so 30 seconds.
Stay innovative. Keep looking towards the future. The companies that continue just to stay focused on what they're doing right now, I think will be left behind. I think the companies that are successful are the ones that are going to continue to invest in their education and in their resources in the future and technology. So we see that with all of our members. We have startups all the way up to the larger companies like Microsoft, IBM, Intuit. These companies understand that the way to succeed is to constantly stay innovative, and that's really what fintech is all about.
I'll mention something on the regulatory side. I think there's a huge opportunity for learning and cross-collaboration with industry experts and regulators. There's a lot of hunger on the part of the regulatory community globally and at the country level to understand better what's happening. This was what you said. and also to allow for appropriate experimentation. I think because, as we've heard, this is essentially a kind of securities market, usually you need some kind of space from the regulator to be able to develop this in a country. And so I think, sandboxes, other approaches to enable regulators to allow for the transformative opportunities that financial technology allows is going to be really important.
I think there's tremendous value in solving problems in emerging markets. So don't shy away from that and reach out to World Bank and IFC country offices to guide you through it.
We need mentors. So if you came to me and said, hey, I'm going to give you $1 million, I would say, I'll trade you your $1 million, David, for 2 hours every month for a year to mentor the kids, because we can burn through money left and right. But if you give me your time and give the kids your time that we support in our incubators to show them this is how you do things, that is far more valuable than money. Because with your mentoring also probably comes your network and people who've gone out, done this before and failed, and will show them how to be successful. And so that's basically it. If you have a question about diversity and inclusion, we can have that conversation, because I'm going to put it in terms of customer acquisition cost. Your current customers and your future customers. But in general, if you'd like to support any of these people, money is always great. I personally will trade you your money for your time.
Okay, my message to all of us and audience would be the following. I believe personally that there is a lot of noise, a lot of hype. Some other people are also seeing that. There is a lot of promising, etc. So my message to you would be like President Reagan says, don't trust, verify.
Awesome. And so now I want to open the floor for 1 or 2 questions. That's
We answered your social impact question.
yeah. So if okay. Sure.
So I'm up next, so I'm hoping to get, I have so many things I want to say based on all of these conversations, but the question about we always talk about impact, social impact, and improving the lives of communities when we talk about outside the U.S., and then we talk about the U.S. as the place to innovate for those guys who are trying to raise a bunch of money. It's like, okay, hang on, wait a minute. We have a community that we often never reference in the U.S. called Native Americans. This is our own little third world, and I'm going to throw that out as one example of a community that around crowdfunding whether it's intrastate or Reg CF, whatever, that, as you say, reaching out to these communities is not easy. They're also their own nation, right? So there's some really interesting challenges here in the U.S. as well that I think are sandboxes for other places too. So I wondered if you had any particular thoughts about those kinds of things.
I have some thoughts. No, we were working with the Native American tribe because they asked us they want a platform, sort of like a bank, because they said, hey, Samson, you know what Native American tribes have a lot of? Casinos. How many of them own their own banks? And they were like, what do casinos make? They make money. But once it leaves the reservation, where does it go? Because if you don't control the money, so we're in the process of going through the hurdles. Uncle Sam has set up some really interesting tax rules so that the moment it leaves the reservation, you have to declare it, claim it, and it's almost as bad as not having it. And on another conversation along with the tribes, it's on the innovation front is, what does it look like if you're a tribal entity, a sovereign nation, and you want to accept money from medical marijuana or from other resources? And it's like, oh, that's interesting. So we're going through that because we recognize they can have casinos, but they don't have control of their cash. And they want to flip that.
Can I jump
I can
in?
also suggest in this country, for instance, in the area of identities, this country is really very good to solve 2 main problems. One is so-called identity fraud, which is a huge problem. So in some countries where you don't have identity, then it's easy. But in this country, it's a very serious problem. So some people collecting your tax. That's number one. And number two, all these voting laws and other issues. So some blockchain identities across would be very good, because if some people are afraid of having explicit identity, then they can have anonymous identities and use them for voting or tax returns, etc. So in developed countries, identities could have also a positive effect.
I wanted to push back a little bit on the assumption that innovation takes place in the US and gets exported. I think that one of the things that I've learned working for the past 3+ years in sub-Saharan Africa is when you have huge problems, you're gonna be very quickly becoming very innovative in ways of solving those issues. And I mean, M-Pesa has, maybe 12, 13 years of mobile money. It's an idea that generated in Kenya, and now it's being imported all over Eastern and Central Europe. I'm Romanian. M-Pesa is successfully dealing with mobile money in Romania for, I think, 3 years now. And so I think in terms of sort of pay-as-you-go electricity generators that are paid with mobile money. Again, M-Kopa, again in Kenya, I think, or in Tanzania, I forget.
Both.
In both, yeah. It's very successful in bringing electricity to those who are off the grid or away from the grid. And so I know that being US-based, it's always, and sometimes for us too, because we spend a lot of time here, the idea that the US is exporting innovation, and to some extent it is. But I think a lot of the times we see on the ground ideas that are generated by the community or local entrepreneurs because they see a need that perhaps is not present here.
Yeah, and I want to echo that is, the reason for this session is really that, because when you just look at this room and it's a US event, and we want to really just bring the innovation around the world, say that, here in other parts, in Africa, in Asia, in different places, that you see this amazing innovation, which that can be inspiring or can also be lucrative as well. And so, if you need, go to emerging market, if you need just change regulations in the U.S., or if you need to just find innovators or incubators, be a mentor, just find us. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you get a picture of us, the panel?